If you're somebody who still translates from their native language to English while having conversations, I know it is super frustrating and you're ready to change. Well, it is not so much of a natural transition from thinking in your native tongue to thinking in English. You have to pull some specific efforts. On this channel, I've tried answering the question, how to think in English, from my personal perspective and journey already, quite a few times actually. But in this video, I bring a mix of research-based framework, plus my own experience, plus my students' experiences so far. So I'll tell you exactly what has actually worked for me and my students and what hasn't. Without more ado, let's get into the first framework. The first one is called chunking. This is nothing except using some set phrases in your conversations. Now, the reason native speakers are so confident starting a conversation, at least, is because they have a bunch of set phrases that they use in their everyday conversations and that imprints into their memory. So they don't have to think the first word that comes out of their mouth. Check this out. Whenever two Americans meet, and they know that they now have to make a conversation with each other, they try to ask some questions according to the situation. So let's imagine an informal situation in which two Americans come face to face and now they will try to make a conversation. I've seen Americans almost competing with one another to ask this question first. How's it going? How's it going? Now, the reason why people prefer to ask the first question in a conversation is because this doesn't only put the onus of answering on the other person, it also gives you the chance to structure your answer based on what the other person says. So this basically buys you time to think and relax. So that is really a good way of starting your conversations. If you think you won't be able to answer the questions very well unless you have some structure in the conversation, then being the first person who asks the question is a good pick. You should become the initiator. You should become the questioner who asks the first question. And these questions are supposed to be pretty simple. Something that we ask people all the time in our everyday conversations. How's it going? How are you? How was your weekend? How's work? How's family? How's life treating you? And to which you can actually predict the answer because the answer is going to be pretty simple or generic. So if somebody says, I had a really long week, what about you? You can start to answer with this chunk. And I've used the same for many, many years and it works every single time. You can either use it to say, I know what you're talking about. Just have to change the tone every time you use it to make it sound more appropriate according to the situation. And say the same thing actually. So you do not have to worry about thinking the first word. And also it will get you some time to think what you're going to say next. So I had a really long weekend. I know what you're talking about. I had the same. I had the same. Or say something different with but. I know what you're talking about, but I'm lucky enough to have a relaxing week or a relaxing weekend. In most cases, using I at the first word of your sentence and then saying something after that to complete the rest of the sentence. For example, I know what you're talking about. I feel you. I hear you. I understand. I agree. Oh, I know. This will help you get by in almost every situation. And also, this is similar to using well. You must have seen many people using the filler word well. And that is why I say that filler words are not always so bad. It only makes your English sound more natural and a lot less mechanical. So saying well, or I know what you're talking about, but I know what you're talking about, and to say something similar to what the speaker has already said, you will buy enough time for yourself to complete at least the first part of the conversation. And let me tell you, once you get started in a conversation, it is not going to be as hard as the first step every time you open your mouth to speak. And this is exactly what I want you to follow. Using some filler words or some phrases. Here's a list of conversation starters on the screen. I want you to take a screenshot and take a printout because you know what? I am somebody who is in a habit of reading maps all the time. Whenever I talk to somebody and the topic of places comes up, I immediately check the world map that I have here on my wall to see what place the other person is naming. The country, the city, the state, whatever it is. And that is how I almost remember the shape of most of the countries at this point. So whenever somebody says Canada, I can imagine the shape, the outline of the country on the map. And this is exactly what I recommend learners of English do. I want you to take out a print of all the conversation starters or the words that you keep forgetting frequently in the conversation. Stick it somewhere around your workstation where you sit and speak, where you sit and have conversations every single day to help you as a reminder. This will not only help you memorize things better because of repeated vision, but also there is something called object permanence, which means that you start to forget the things that you do not see in front of your eyes. And that is the reason why most learners forget vocabulary so easily. Whenever you learn a new vocabulary word, you might be able to remember it for the first 1 or 2 days, and then you start to forget it. The memory fades, and this is a very natural process. But to bypass this natural process, I want you to write that word down on a piece of paper, or maybe on a big chart paper. Stick it around somewhere in your house where you can regularly keep looking at it, regularly keep revising it. And also, if you have a list of conversation starters stuck somewhere around your wall where your eyes keeps falling, you'll be able to get by any conversation smoothly because you don't have to waste your time or energy thinking what to say. It saves up a lot of mental energy and work. Point number 2 is self-talks. Self-talks have helped me so much that I didn't have to worry too much about thinking in English. I kind of naturally started thinking in English because I had this one habit that I followed for years and years on end. Actually, I never stopped. I still do it. So this is the one thing that I credit most of these benefits to: narration. Whenever I did something, even now, whenever I do something, I try to narrate the story to myself. Whatever actions I'm doing. For example, if I'm working in the kitchen, I wouldn't just narrate what is happening around me or pretend to be a YouTuber, like have a solo conversation, but pretend to be in a 2-person conversation. So I'd say, let's say I'm making tea, I'd say, do you know where the sugar might be? And the other person, which is also me, responds, I do not know, maybe somewhere around here? Let's look. And so I keep taking the conversation step by step. Person A says something, person B responds to it. Person A says something again, person B responds again. So this is how I build up a conversation. And that is exactly how I'm able to practice the set phrases that I have for myself, the ones that I like, the ones that I can use repeatedly again and again in my conversations. So here's what I want you to do. When you go to bed tonight, I want you to take the first 5-10 minutes before you fall asleep to think about your entire day or anything, to imagine something that you want to do in the future. We all, some way or the other, live in a dream world. We imagine things. We imagine how our future would look. I want you to leverage that imagination and think about it in English. It is not going to be a two-way conversation always, which is fine. Sometimes it can be a monologue. But I want you to take those 5-10 minutes of you being on bed but not being able to sleep to think in English. That is how your brain will start to work on English mode, which it isn't able to do right now. I've done this for many, many years and the results are excellent. I've also asked many of my students to do the same, and every time they come back with a review, it is a super positive one. The steps are pretty simple. When you're on the bed, I want you to think about something, have a self-talk in English. Unlike real conversations with people, self-talks are not so pressurizing. They don't make you so nervous because there you do not have the pressure to come up with new words and ideas back to back. Nobody is judging you. So learning to speak or think in English in such an environment is at least 2 times easier than learning to think in English from real-life conversations. The final point is on reading. And guess what? I'm going to ask you to read a total of 1 page every single day. You heard it right. Just 1 page. But here's how you're going to do it. First, take out a page from a book, magazine, or the morning newspaper that you want to read. First, I want you to read the whole text loudly, as loudly as your family and neighbors can bear. Next, you want to go on to read the same text in your mind without whispering. But I know it is highly likely that you won't be able to do it smoothly, because being able to read mentally is directly related to being able to think in English smoothly while having conversations. I remember so many students from my school who weren't able to read in their mind at all, even when they were asked to. They always read in whispers, and naturally, they weren't good speakers of the language. But this can be changed by trying. So if you're not able to read in your mind very smoothly, don't worry about it. Whispering can definitely be your first step, and ultimately you have to aim at being able to read comfortably in your mind. The first step is going to help you with your pronunciation. So when you read aloud, you listen to your pronunciation, your accent, and you might have some questions. I want you to fix that up in that step. The next step is just to create this English zone around you and to strengthen your memory. This is like having an inner conversation in English where you're not even freezing, where you're not even stopping to think, where you're not even getting stuck. So it is all about maintaining the flow, not just in reading, but also in conversations, which will translate from reading smoothly to speaking smoothly. That's it. A pro tip on this class would be crash on comprehensible input plus silent period, which basically means that it is completely okay to take a few seconds to think what you're going to say in the conversation. So if somebody asks you a question, you definitely know the answer to that, and you also know the framework that you're going to use. But if you don't give yourself enough time to recollect and to calm your nerves down, you won't be able to follow anything. And this is the most common complaint. I know everything, but I'm not able to use anything. Words don't come to mind. Well, you have to give yourself that time. It is not a bad thing to take a few seconds from that conversation and not be rushed by the other speaker to speak in the conversation, because this will only help you save time later in the conversation, because then you wouldn't have to stop as much. Alrighty, that was it for this video. I hope you use the framework, benefit from it, and let me know about it. I'm going to see you again in the next one. Until then, keep learning.